Hello, and welcome to the 37th video in my Punishing Graven lore series. Today we'll cover chapter 25 of the main story, Everglowing Justice. In the months following her escape from Constellia, Echo has been branded a wanted criminal, constantly pursued by both Babylonia and Corono. Now she travels the surface looking for a long-lost friend, in the home she once abandoned for her freedom. Now without any further delay, chapter 25, Everglowing Justice. Following the events of Constellia, Echo escaped the city and became a fugitive hunted by the Purifying Force. In the months after, she hides out in far-off conservation areas to look for information and evade pursuers. After she connected to the test subject, who she now calls Cecily, a surge of long-sealed memories began to flood her mind. Long ago, she escaped from somewhere called Utopia, aided by a friend named Lena. Now she searches for any trace of her friend in the city she abandoned so long ago. However, as a fugitive on the run, she has no allies, no resources, and no one to trust. But still, there just may be one person in all of Babylonia willing to put their faith in a criminal for the sake of justice. Lee and Commandant make their way to the edge of the Clean Zone to investigate an abnormally high number of missing persons reports, along with a destroyed conservation area. Commandant searches through the records of the missing residents, while Lee prepares their transport to Conservation 112 to validate the possibility their disappearances were related to Fort Winter. When Lee leaves the tent, Echo introduces herself as a former construct of Utopia, wanting to borrow Commandant's strength to destroy both it and the Aurora Squadron, Corono's private army. With information like this, she could have easily gained Babylonia's support, but instead chose him, a single Commandant, and he'd like to know why. The truth is, she's out of options, and her time before connecting to Cecily is hazy at best. But one thing she remembers is Sika's unwavering trust in Commandant's judgment, his heart of integrity. Before deploying to the surface, Sika found some inconsistencies in the reports on Constellia. For example, how did Lena even have the ability to connect with the test subject? Why was the military so quick to issue her warrant, and her highly classified identity? So Sika made a request that if he ever came across Echo, to give her a chance, to contact Wells or Hassan, and stay far away from the Purifying Force. So with all this in mind, he accepts her temporary alliance. Meanwhile on Babylonia, Nicola and Wells discuss the need to bring back the test subject, as its presence represents far more than just a Corono experiment. However, their search parties have yet to find anything concrete, and Nicola suggests issuing a warrant for Lena herself to speed up the process. And with the Control Court soon finishing their investigation of Lucia, everything seems to be progressing smoothly for now. Meanwhile, on the other side of Babylonia, Norman meets with Collins, and he has deployed Trojan to Conservation Area 109 to delay the Purifying Force, and if she happens to come across the subject herself, to deliver her to Norman. On the ground, Commandant and Echo go over their plans for investigating Conservation 112, and are surprised to find the area to the camp occupied by the Aurora Squadron. After clearing out the ambush, Commandant gets a notification on his terminal, the newly issued warrant for Lena, on grounds of being a defector. Hearing this, she speaks up in protest, claiming Lena was never a defector, that she was someone who helped her escape Utopia. Since her escape, Echo has been operating under Lena's identity, posing as a member of Babylonia, with Caribou and even Nicola himself being unaware of Lena's true disappearance. The further the two dive into Echo's past, the more questions reveal themselves. What is Echo's true identity? What is Utopia? And how does all of it relate to Project Winter? The next day, they reach the conservation area, finding it completely devoid of life, except for a small drone approaching their position. Suddenly, Echo collapses, and Commandant realizes the drone is equipped with a mind disruptor, and to stabilize her, Commandant initiates a deep mind connection. Within her subconscious, she's guided by Cecily as she digs up memories of her time in Utopia. She remembers herself going through labs as scientists perform all manner of experiments, trying to advance their research on mind fusion. As her mind stabilizes, Commandant learns just a bit more about her connections to Utopia. From what she remembers, Utopia was a shining example of justice and morality, but ever so slowly she found the city, and its leader, her father Pikmin, slipping further into depravity. After Commandant reports the status of Conservation 112 to Hassan, Nicola is reminded of a recent proposal, passed to reopen the investigation into Silver Falcon, an elite squad who went missing in that very same conservation. The members of that squad were all former students of Wells, and Hassan offers a few words of comfort, wondering if the possibility of belated justice for the team even has meaning anymore. Suddenly knocking on the door is Asimov, who has been busy decrypting the files from Fort Winter, and he reveals their research was focused on two fronts: mind replication and mind fusion, with a greater emphasis on the latter. From what he's learned so far, their research is based on the assumption that the ability to become an ascendant is related to the strength of their minds, and that fusing multiple consciousnesses together would result in a more powerful mind, capable of reaching a higher power. Whether or not this theory holds weight is up to debate, but from the experiment records he's found, they have been active for quite some time. Even the two members of Strikehawk, Kamu and Kamui, seem to have been a byproduct of this technology. Acknowledging the possibility of constructs being kidnapped, Asimov suggests reopening investigations into possible defectors and missing constructs, as the report shows constructs from Babylonia seem to make the best test subjects. On the ground, Commandant and Echo make their way inside one of Utopia's smaller airships, checking for any signals Lena left behind. While searching, the nearby control terminal lights up and projects the voice of Pikmin as he calls out to Echo, telling her that despite what she remembers, Utopia's ultimate goal never changed, that his great work continues on, that one day she will understand his grand plan, that soon they will be reunited with those who were lost, as a true family. Before the panel goes silent, he leaves her one last gift: the backup files on the friends she's been looking for. Searching through the documents, she finds Lena's information, and it notes her last known location as Conservation Area 107. The next day, they arrive at their destination, only to find the entire population on edge. Supposedly, Lena came here to search for traces of the Aurora Squadron, and to either their benefit or detriment, Echo spots a unit leading residents away. As they leave, they tear up trees and grass to fabricate signs of struggle, making it clear they are the hetero creatures responsible for the missing people. Following their trail, the two find a camp, where they keep the residents before taking them to Utopia, and together they fight off the guards, free the residents, and tail the fleeing soldiers back to their base. The next day, they are awoken by soldiers moving towards a nearby airship, and the two follow close behind, seeing this as their ticket to Utopia. For Echo, navigating the ship is a breeze, and they find their way to the crew's quarters, only to walk into a trap, as the room is filled with mind disruptors. Commandant calls Lee to provide support, as he initiates another deep mind connection for Echo. Soon she wakes up to the sound of shots being fired, as Lee arrives and subdues the Aurora Squadron soldiers. He opens the cabin and checks the logs of the imprisoned residents, only to realize that's not the case at all. Most of the people present came voluntarily, and agreed to be experimented on, if it meant receiving food and safety. Echo tries convincing the people to leave, but she doesn't receive the reactions she wants. To the people here, Utopia represents the possibility of stability and safety, something quite rare in the current age. For people who have reached the bottom of despair, it is a gift, a dream given form, and if that dream takes their life, what difference does it make? Live well, and die with a purpose being used for research, or struggle daily to survive, dying cold, hungry, and afraid. To the people here and many others, that choice couldn't be more clear. Hearing this, she can't help but be afraid, scared that Lena will end up just like these people, brainwashed by the comforts offered by Pikmin. Soon other squads arrive to take them to nearby conservation areas, and Echo leaves to patrol their surroundings. Lee informs Commandant that the Purifying Force is tailing them, and they are getting close, so he takes the chance to send Asimov the data he collected from Echo's mind, making Babylonia aware of Utopia's existence. The two make camp for the night, and Echo makes good on her earlier promise, telling Commandant about her old home. Utopia was a floating paradise, providing food, shelter, and safety from the corrupted, headed by her father Dr. Pikmin, a true caretaker by all accounts. Long before becoming the Echo she is now, a young Elisa spent her days in peace aboard the floating city, under the care of a construct she saw as an older sister, Cecily. She spent her days promoting the ways and rules of the city. After all, for her who had never seen the outside world, what else could she ask for? She and everyone else the city took in owed everything to Pikmin, and being the subject of a couple of tests were seen as nothing in comparison. Pikmin always highlighted how the best thing one could do was be useful, so Elisa didn't think twice when he suggested she become a construct. That way she could help even more people. To Elisa, now she could be just like Cecily, who she admired so much, helping with her father's work and going on missions. But where she expected joy, she only saw a look of exhaustion and sadness. In the time after her conversion, she put herself to work as Utopia's enforcer, keeping the peace and upholding the rules. One day, purely by chance, She found a normally sealed lab, and having caught sight of Cecily and Pikmin, she couldn't help but listen in. Next to Cecily stood a large suit of armor, all that remained of the friends she lost to Pikmin's experiments. Cecily chose to become the test subject's core to spare Elisa that fate, and hearing this, she rushes into the room to confront the two. This is where she first learned what Pikmin was doing, and that she and Cecily were simply gears in his machine. Following that, Elisa confronted her father, trying to understand what it was he wanted, whether these experiments were part of that justice she was raised to strive towards. After Cecily's passing, many inconsistencies began to reveal themselves. Despite being told that the constructs here were volunteers, their words and actions made it clear they were not. On top of this was the increase in security, more guards, more patrols, and more groups of constructs for her to get settled. Cecily once told her that everything she sees and hears from others should be taken with a grain of salt, validated by her own eyes and ears before acting, so she decides to put that advice to use, paying one of the captured constructs a visit, a girl named Lena. Night after night, she visits Lena's room, wanting her to explain how she sees Utopia. On their first meeting, Lena called it a coronal research laboratory, and to Elisa, all these terms are brand new. Naturally, it takes quite some time before Lena is willing to open up, but eventually they develop a friendship. Elisa wanted to trust in the principles Utopia stood for, but after Cecily's death, she knew those principles were no longer being upheld, so she made Lena a promise to help her and the others escape. After months of planning, Lena and Elisa had finalized their plan to evacuate the captured constructs. Lena would gather those opposed to Pikmin who were being kept prisoner, while Elisa deactivates the security systems from the control room. On that fateful night, the pair put their plan into motion, and while disarming the security, Elisa came across a notebook marked with her name. In it was the truth of her existence and the purpose behind Utopia's founding. No matter how much she tried not to believe it, all along she, and everyone else, were nothing more than ingredients for Pikmin's experiments, and Utopia, the farm. Ever since Cecily's death, she had been trying to make sense of how her father could possibly become so twisted, to the point she never considered the possibility he was like this from the start. She lived her entire life, completely unaware of the cage surrounding her, and now she has the chance to seize her freedom, to pursue the justice she always wanted. But they did not escape that day. There were traitors among the escapees. Lena, Elisa, and many others were recaptured and taken back. After that, they continued trying to escape, but many of the passages had been blocked, and security tightened even further. In the end, Pikmin even tried to integrate Elisa into the test subject, but it rejected her every time. By all accounts, his experiment ended in failure. Cecily, Zika, Nata, and all of the others were still protecting her, even while their minds were fractured within the armor. After that, the consciousnesses within the armor would occasionally rise to the surface to offer aid, and with it she managed to get Utopia's encryption key before escaping. Being unable to access it herself, she gives it to Commandant, hoping Asimov could make better use of it. Without Commandant's help, destroying Utopia and finding Lena seemed like some far-off dream, some impossible feat, and she can't help but see it as some twist of fate. Cecily once told her that justice is bound to echo through the land, and it seems like that day is fast approaching. In the morning, they find another mark from Lena at what should be her last known location, and find the airship almost completely deserted, save for a single hologram of Lena herself. She apologizes to Elisa, admitting that she's exhausted and has decided to surrender herself to Utopia. While most certainly a fake, it's more than enough, and Echo's mind is thrown into chaos. On a nearby screen, Pikmin makes his appearance, those golden eyes piercing straight through Commandant's memory. This man, Pikmin, Kugawa Korono, is the one responsible for it all. He bids the two a farewell as the engine of the airship comes online. They fight their way through the ambush, only to find Pikmin is long gone, and in his place was a massive number of mind disruptors, resulting in significant mind damage, so Echo was taken to receive medical care from the nearby Babylonia squads. Initially scared to hear Babylonia mentioned, Commandant informs her that while unconscious, her warrant was revoked. From now on, both she and Cecily are free. After she fell unconscious, Lee arrived to inform them of the rescinded warrants, and Commandant lets him know that Pikmin is Kugawa Korono. The only reason he would let his identity slip this late into his plans means he's at the point where getting exposed will no longer hurt him. Whatever happens next, they need to make sure Asimov gets his hands on the information before Babylonia. No matter how the pieces fall, everything will be answered in Utopia. In Babylonia, the Parliament has decided to make their move, to strike at the very heart of Project Winter. With the information from Echo and the airship, they have definitive proof of Corono's illegal experimentation. Even though everyone has benefited from the advancements of Project Winter, most of the people present have come to the realization that they have lost far more than they have gained. Wells appears with a report on these unnecessary sacrifices, a staggering number of constructs and squads reported as killed or missing, used for testing. Regardless of how this research supposedly benefits humanity, who will be left to fight if the task force learns they can go missing in some underground laboratory? That is the future Babylonia is headed towards. That is, if they as the Parliament refuse to act. Asimov contacts Commandant, telling him that while slim, the proposal to ban construct testing has passed. Going over the situation in Utopia, Commandant lets him know that Pikmin is Kugawa, leading Asimov to fear Corono has infiltrated deeper than they first realized. Additionally, just because Corono experiments are illegal on paper doesn't mean they will stop, so he needs to have it handled before the Purifying Force catches up to ensure the data is not destroyed. And to get it done, he might need a few extra hands, so he sends Lucia and Liv on a path for rendezvous in Utopia. Meanwhile on the ground, Echo wakes up in a field hospital. It's the first time in a long time she's woken up feeling rested, no pursuers and no one to fear. In fact, from what the construct taking care of her says about Babylonia, she feels it might even be a good place to stay. But it's not where she should be right now. Along with Cecily, the two sneak out of the conservation area, the first place in a long time to make them feel truly safe. From listening in on Commandant's conversation with Lee, she knows Babylonia is planning an attack on Utopia, but its nature as a floating fortress makes tracking it nearly impossible, so she has decided to become the torch that will clear away that darkness, and with herself as the beacon, she will lead the way forward. She takes her terminal and contacts Pikmin, who is more than happy to receive his daughter with open arms. After his failure with Elisa and Cecily, Pikmin didn't simply halt his experiments. While nowhere near their quality, he continued and created another test subject to be used. Soon his plans will be completed, the true goal of Project Winter, a method to stop aging, death, and sadness, where all people are united as one to reach a higher power. Meanwhile, in the conservation area, the complete Grey Raven has finally been reunited, and with their target in sight, there's no time to lose. Using the decryption key she got from Asimov, Liv surrounds Utopia's main base with the smaller airships, locking them down to prevent escape. Throughout the floating fortress, everyone can sense the impending end of the conflict, with Echo and Cecily continuing to fight through the city's defenses, as Pikmin himself watches everything unfold. His test subject is nearly complete, but it's missing the capstone, a consciousness strong enough to lead. Without one, it won't be capable of reaching that higher power. It'll remain nothing more than a mass of aimless mind data. Finding himself cornered, low on time and out of options, Pikmin decides it's time for Plan B. On Babylonia, the situation is only getting worse for Corono. Pikmin is on his last leg, Utopia is bleeding resources, and Corono is scrambling. No one was expecting a hit this hard at this time, and Corono was revealing far too many cards, sending every private squad they have to reinforce the city without any time to cover their tracks. Meanwhile, Pikmin has finished fine-tuning his test subject. After years of effort and hundreds of lives given, his plans will soon reach their climax. For one so wholly dedicated to his research, it's only appropriate that he give himself in pursuit of this goal. The minds within the test subject are more compatible the longer they live in similar environments, and no one has been a part of Utopia longer than him. On the deck of the main fortress, Elisa finds her father, now merged with the test subject. He calls on the remaining Aurora Squadron forces, and during the fight manages to trap Echo within his mind space. Once and for all, it's time to correct the mistakes of the past, and put an end to the sins of her father.
Elisa, my perfect ingredient. Be with me, Elisa.
Father.
Alyssa, my child.
Elisa is the past I carry on my shoulders. But now, I'm Echo! Sister! Let our determination cut through the darkness!
In the distance, a series of explosions signal the end of Utopia. Grey Raven and the other Babylonian forces escape the falling fortress as the land and sky are lit aflame. Meanwhile, the test subject has fallen silent, and Echo herself has used all the strength she had, so someone offers her a helping hand. Since the day of her escape, she has been searching for a friend who is no longer in the world. However, Lena was never truly missing. She was within the armor, and for a second time, guides her friend out of Utopia. Echo appears from the smoke, followed by the sound of crashing airships. Just as Cecily told her, no matter what, one day justice would echo throughout the land, as sure as day follows night. And now she stands tall as that symbol of ever-glowing justice, looking towards tomorrow. After a week, the signs of battle have already begun to fade, and Commandant meets with Echo on a nearby hill. She asks him to deliver Lena's dog tag to Sika, since at this point her personality has completely faded into Cecily's mind. As for her promise to return to Babylonia, the higher-ups have given her the choice whether or not to return, and she's decided to track down the fragments of the Aurora squadron that escaped the battle, to make sure another Utopia never emerges. The two bid their farewells, and Commandant takes a transport back to Babylonia. Some time later, Wells informs Hassan that the reports on human construct experimentation were leaked, and that they are seeing a rise in armed protests, with Forsaken being seen among them. For every success that comes Babylonia's way, the world has a plan to balance the scales. Today is April Fool's, and fate has decided to play a cruel joke. On this day, a certain transport crashed, and the Grey Raven Commandant has gone missing. Alright everyone, and we have just finished chapter 25 of the main story. So, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. It was a pretty direct, there we go, I'm not going to say short, but it was a direct chapter, right? Elisa met with Commandant, and then they went looking for Lena, and they blew up Utopia, right? Everything else around that is either like Elisa's backstory, or just like some checking in with other characters and seeing what they're doing. Which, at this point, I don't find important enough to bring up, so I won't bring it up here. I know at the end, Hassan was like, oh no, we need to make sure that Commandant's not dead. And obviously we know Commandant's not dead because we haven't gotten EOS yet. The actual ending of that node, it shows you that Lithos actually pulled Commandant out of the wreckage of the transport. But yeah, running through the chapter, we have, right, Commandant goes down to the surface to look into some people that are disappearing. Which, of course, throughout the course of the chapter, we learn that all these disappearing people are Pikmin and Utopia snatching residents and, like, soliciting residents from the conservation areas. We follow Elisa around, and she's looking for Lena, but it turns out that Lena was, already dead, and she was in the armor. And then, at the end there, everybody goes and attacks Utopia. Everybody goes and attacks Utopia, and they burn it down. So yeah, really straightforward chapter. And I'm excited to see how they're going to bridge this into next chapter, or if it's going to, just kind of start out of the blue, kind of disconnected. But anyway, that's all for me. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next video, where we cover chapter 26 of the main story, Cradle Parade.